The kingdom of Eldoria lay cloaked in mist, its mountains like jagged teeth cutting the sky. Gothic spires of black stone rose from cliff edges, their shadows stretching across valleys filled with whispering forests. Within this realm, nobility moved with grace, but behind every smile lurked ambition, envy, and schemes as dark as the night. And in the heart of this court was Leora, a young noblewoman with eyes the color of storm clouds and a gift that whispered of ancient forces. She could feel the unseen threads of magic, the pulse of life that others ignored. Yet, in this kingdom of power and prestige, such gifts were feared more than celebrated. Leora's life had always been one of careful observation. She walked lightly among the court, ever aware of the unspoken rules and hidden glances. She had learned to be polite, to bow when expected, and to smile even when her heart trembled. But there was one figure in the court whose presence made her skin crawl with a mixture of fear and anticipation, the beta, known for his charm, cunning, and the subtle cruelty hidden behind polite words. He was a man who thrived on power over others' hearts, and Leora had been his newest plaything. The night of the masquerade arrived with a hush of expectation. Candles flickered in crystal chandeliers, casting dancing light on embroidered gowns and gilded masks. Music swirled through the great hall, mingling with laughter, whispers, and the soft shuffle of silk. Leora moved among the guests, her mask delicate and silver, her heart quiet but wary. She did not wish to attract attention, yet somehow the beta found her. He appeared beside her with a sly smile, bowing low. "Leora, your beauty outshines even the moon tonight," he said, voice smooth as polished stone. She forced a polite smile, but her pulse quickened. She had heard such words before, only to discover the cruelty hidden behind them. As the night wore on, the beta guided her to the center of the hall. "Shall we dance?" he asked, his tone both teasing and commanding. Leora hesitated, sensing the gaze of the entire court upon her. Yet she could not refuse. They moved to the rhythm, the music carrying them in a swirl of motion and light. Then, without warning, he leaned close, whispering words meant only for her but laced with mockery. "Do you truly believe yourself worthy of attention, Leora? Perhaps some hearts are meant to be broken rather than cherished." Her chest tightened. A blush rose across her cheeks, not from embarrassment but from the sting of his words. She wanted to retreat, to vanish into the shadows, but the hall's eyes were on them. The beta's grin widened, a predator savoring his prey's discomfort. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called, his voice echoing across the hall. "Our sweet Leora believes she can outshine all here. Shall we test her claim?" Gasps rose, and whispers spread like wildfire. Leora's heart sank as he motioned for her to perform a display of her so-called gift. Though she had never used her ability for show, she had no choice but to comply. She closed her eyes, reaching for the subtle threads of magic that she had always felt but rarely revealed. A soft shimmer of light pulsed in her hands, delicate and fragile. The beta's eyes narrowed, his smile twisting into something cruel. "Is this all?" he sneered. "A mere flicker, a whisper. I expected more. But perhaps even illusions are too much for you." The court erupted in laughter. Leora's heart felt as if it were breaking, and tears threatened to spill. She had thought herself prepared, but nothing could have readied her for such humiliation. Her shoulders trembled, and she fought to maintain her composure. She was not accustomed to being the target of such cruelty. And then, in one final blow, the beta leaned close once more. "Remember this, my dear. Not all who admire you are meant to lift you up. Some exist only to remind you of your limits." The words cut deeper than any dagger. Leora fled the hall, the rustle of her gown echoing like a morning song through the corridors. She did not stop until she reached the quiet of her private chamber, the door locking with a soft click behind her. She pressed her hands to her face, tears slipping past her fingers, and let herself feel the weight of betrayal, shame, and heartbreak. She had expected court intrigues, whispers, even rivalry, but not this merciless cruelty. The beta had shattered her confidence, leaving her small, fragile, and unsure. And yet, beneath the despair, something flickered, a stubborn ember of defiance. She would not remain broken. She would not let this be the end of her story. The night stretched on, and the castle seemed to lean in closer, as if the shadows themselves were listening. It was then, in the darkness beyond her window, that she felt a presence unlike any she had ever known. A figure stood on the balcony across the courtyard, cloaked in shadows, yet his presence radiated authority and power. The Alpha King. Rumors had surrounded him for years, tales of his iron rule, of mystical abilities that could bind curses with a single word, of a heart that had been untouched by love and scarred by loss. Few dared approach him, fewer still caught his gaze without fear. And yet, he was staring at El Iwari. She froze, caught between awe and fear. His eyes were sharp, yet they held a strange curiosity, an intensity that made her pulse quicken. It was as if he could see every fear she had, every shame, every secret thought she had tried to hide. And still, he lingered, silent, watching. For a long moment, neither moved. The only sound was the distant wind through the castle towers, carrying the faint scent of snow and pine. Then, without a word, he turned, disappearing into the darkness of the night. Leora pressed herself against the window, her heart a storm of confusion and strange anticipation. Who was this man who dared watch her when others mocked? And why did she feel, against all reason, that her life was about to change because of him? Sleep came fitfully that night, haunted by visions of the Alpha King's eyes, the Beta's cruel smile, and the fragile pulse of her own hidden power. She could not have known that these two men so different, yet bound by fate in ways she could not yet understand, would shape her future in ways beyond imagination. By dawn, Leora's resolve had begun to harden. She would not remain the trembling girl the Beta had mocked. She would learn to harness her gift, to stand with strength and dignity, and perhaps, one day, face the Alpha King not as a frightened girl, but as someone worthy of his notice. Yet even as hope stirred within her, a shadow of unease lingered. The Alpha King's attention was not simple kindness. It carried a weight, a destiny she could not yet comprehend. And the Beta's cruelty was far from over. Whispers of revenge lingered in the corners of the court, promising further torment. As the sun rose over the jagged mountains of Eldoria, painting the cliffs with blood-red light, Leora stood at her window, gazing toward the distant balcony where she had last seen him. Her heart both feared and yearned. Somewhere, in the folds of shadow and light, her fate waited. And the first thread of a story, cruel and beautiful, had been woven. The kingdom had not seen the last of her tears, nor had it seen the power that would rise from them. And somewhere beyond the castle walls, the Alpha King moved in silence, watching, waiting, drawn to a heart broken yet unbowed. The winds whispered through the towers, carrying a single, unspoken promise. Her story had only just begun. The morning sun struggled to pierce the heavy fog that clung to Eldoria's cliffs, casting pale light across the black stone of the castle. Inside the grand hall, life seemed unchanged: laughter, conversation, and the rustle of silk. But beneath it all, attention hummed, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Leora moved quietly among the servants and nobles, her heart still raw from the Beta's cruel games the night before. She had barely slept. Images of the masquerade, the mockery, the laughter, and the Beta's cold, sharp words haunted her. And then there had been the shadow, the figure she could not forget, the Alpha King, watching her silently from the distant balcony. That gaze, so intense and commanding, had left her trembling with a mix of fear and curiosity. Leora did her best to ignore it. She could not yet understand why the mere presence of one man stirred such a storm in her heart. Yet as the day wore on, whispers began to circulate in the court, carrying a tension that made every step she took feel heavier. The Beta had already begun murmuring slander, spinning the events of the masquerade into tales that made her appear foolish. It was during the midday audience, in the glittering throne room, that the Alpha King finally made his presence undeniable. The great doors swung open with a thunderous sound, and the hall fell silent. All eyes turned to him. His figure, tall and regal, moved with a quiet authority that demanded attention. He wore the dark robes of his office, embroidered with silver symbols that hinted at his mastery over forces unseen. His eyes, sharp and piercing, scanned the room until they rested on Leora. For a moment, She felt as if the entire world had narrowed to the space between them. He did not approach immediately. Instead, he spoke, his voice low, resonant, and commanding. Filling the hall, "Leora of Eldoria," he said, his gaze unwavering, "you have endured humiliation, and yet you remain standing. You have a strength that this court has failed to recognize. From this day forward, your life is no longer yours alone." Gasps rippled through the audience. The beta's smug smile faltered. Leora's pulse quickened. She opened her mouth, but words failed her. The Alpha King continued, his voice carrying a power that made even the most arrogant nobles bow their heads slightly in awe. "You are claimed by me, not as a prize, but as a partner in the trials that await this kingdom. Your gifts, your courage, and your heart are bound to me by destiny." The hall seemed to shiver under the weight of his words. Leora felt her knees grow weak, her chest tight. She had known the rumors about the Alpha King, how he claimed those he saw as worthy. How few ever dared to resist him. And now, she was at the center of his attention. The beta stepped forward, attempting to mask his fear with arrogance. "King, surely you do not mean to interfere with matters of court?" The Alpha's gaze snapped to him, sharp as a blade. "I interfere when cruelty is dealt to those who do not deserve it." There was a weight in his words that silenced the beta completely. Leora saw the faintest flicker of anger in the beta's eyes, and she knew he would not forget this moment. "Rise, Leora," the Alpha commanded. His voice softened slightly, though the authority remained. "Come to me, and know that you are no longer alone in this world of shadows and power." Leora felt a strange mixture of fear and relief. She moved forward, her steps hesitant but determined. As she approached him, she realized that this man, this Alpha King, was nothing like the cruel nobles she had encountered. Before, there was a power in him that demanded respect, yes, but also a depth, a hint of vulnerability hidden beneath the surface. When she stood before him, he extended his hand. "Take it," he said simply. "Let your fate and mine be joined." For a heartbeat, Leora hesitated. Could she trust him? Could she allow herself to be claimed by a man whose reputation alone inspired fear? But something in his gaze, the quiet intensity, the acknowledgement of her strength, compelled her to take the hand he offered. The moment their fingers touched, a warmth spread through her, unlike anything she had felt before. It was as if invisible threads wove around them, connecting their fates in ways beyond understanding. A soft shiver ran down her spine, and she knew that her life had changed forever. The Alpha King lowered his eyes to hers. "You are safe with me," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to echo inside her chest. "And I will protect you from those who would see you broken again." Even as relief flooded her, a shadow of doubt remained. Could she truly rely on him? Could anyone, even a king, shield her from the cruelty she had endured? And yet, the warmth in his touch, the unwavering steadiness in his gaze, made her want to believe. The court was silent, watching every movement, every expression. The nobles whispered among themselves, their curiosity and envy barely contained. The beta, pale and tense, realized that his hold over her had been shattered. For the first time, Leora felt a strange satisfaction, not in revenge, but in knowing that she had been chosen by someone whose power and judgment far surpassed the petty cruelty of the court. The Alpha King guided her to a side chamber, away from prying eyes. The walls of the room were lined with ancient books and relics, the air heavy with the scent of incense and old stone. Candles flickered in brass holders, casting long shadows across the floor. "You have been hurt," he said softly, once they were alone. "And yet, you endure. That is rare." Leora looked down, unsure how to respond. I do not know what this means," she admitted. "Why me? Why now?" He studied her quietly. "Because destiny often chooses those who are overlooked, who are underestimated. Your heart, your gift, they are not weaknesses. They are strengths waiting to be recognized." She felt a surge of emotion, a mix of gratitude, fear, and something unspoken, a longing she did not fully understand. For the first time in her life, someone saw her for more than her station, her appearance, or the cruel games of others. The Alpha King moved closer, but did not touch her. Instead, he offered a small, enigmatic smile. Rest tonight, Leora. You will need your strength. The path before you is not easy, and the shadows of the past do not release their hold lightly. But you are not alone. I will walk beside you. Her heart pounded, torn between hope and apprehension. The beta's betrayal still lingered in her mind. Yet here was a man who claimed her not to mock, but to protect, to honor, to recognize. That night, as Leora lay in her chamber, she could not stop thinking of the Alpha King. She imagined his eyes, dark and stormy, his quiet strength, the faint warmth of his hand when she had touched it. Sleep eluded her, and in his place came visions of a destiny she could not yet understand, a life intertwined with power, danger, and a man whose presence stirred something deep within her. Outside, the castle remained shrouded in mist. The wind whispered through the towers, carrying echoes of ancient magic, of promises yet unspoken. Somewhere in the darkness, the Alpha King watched from his own chamber, considering the fragile new bond between them, aware that claiming her had changed more than just her fate, it had begun to change his own. And in the quiet corners of Eldoria, unseen eyes watched. The beta, humiliated and furious, would not rest. Whispers of revenge stirred among courtiers who envied or feared the king's choice. And Leora, once fragile and uncertain, began the first steps of a journey that would test her strength, her heart, and the bond that had been forged with a man whose power and presence were both frightening and exhilarating. The threads of destiny had been pulled taut. The game had changed, and somewhere beyond the shadows of the castle, the unseen forces of the kingdom stirred. Sensing that a union both feared and longed for had begun, Leora pressed her hands to her chest, feeling the faint warmth of the king's touch linger in memory. She did not yet understand the full measure of what it meant to be claimed, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty: her life would never be the same again. A storm was coming, and she was no longer alone to face it. The castle of Eldoria seemed alive with whispers, as if the walls themselves remembered the pain, betrayal, and ambition that had echoed through its halls for centuries. Leora had spent the past few days adjusting to her new reality, walking a path both exhilarating and frightening. She had been claimed by the Alpha King, yet the weight of that claim pressed upon her like the chill of a winter storm. She was no longer merely a noblewoman in the court. She was bound by destiny to a man whose power both awed and terrified her. The Alpha King's presence was inescapable. He moved through the halls with quiet authority, his eyes ever watchful, assessing, protective. Leora felt his gaze on her even when he was out of sight, and it both comforted and unsettled her. It was a strange feeling, to be under someone's scrutiny and yet feel seen, truly seen. For the first time, she had spent her life hiding, masking her abilities, her fears, her desires. But now, with him, there was no pretense, only raw honesty, and the stirrings of emotion she could not yet name. Yet danger lingered, as subtle and relentless as the fog clinging to the cliffs. The beta, humiliated and furious at being outshone, had not retreated into silence. Instead, he moved through the shadows of the court, whispering slander, plotting to reclaim Leora or destroy her reputation. He was a master of manipulation, a spider weaving webs that caught even the most careful nobles. Leora felt the tension in every glance, every whisper that followed her as she walked the corridors. The Alpha King was aware of the danger, and he made no attempt to hide it. One evening, he found her in the library, a sanctuary of ancient books and relics, and spoke to her with a seriousness that made her heart tighten. The beta does not forgive easily, he said, his voice low and steady. He underestimates you, as all men do, until they realize the cost of their arrogance. Leora closed the book she had been reading, startled by the intensity of his words. And what if he succeeds? She asked, her voice trembling slightly, though she fought to maintain composure. The king's eyes darkened, shadowed by memory and unspoken battles. Then we will face him together. But you must understand, Leora, the path before you is not merely about survival. It is about embracing who you are, your gifts, your strength, and the power of what we share. She felt a shiver run through her, a mixture of anticipation and fear. The Alpha King's claim over her was no longer simply a matter of protection. It carried a weight of destiny, an unspoken promise that they were bound together not just by the court, but by the very fabric of fate. Days passed, and Leora began to explore parts of the kingdom she had never seen. Guided by the Alpha King, he took her to hidden forests where the trees whispered secrets in the wind, to ruins haunted by the echoes of long-dead sorcerers, and to rivers that glowed faintly under the moonlight, revealing faint traces of magic only she could perceive. These excursions were not merely lessons, they were invitations into a world of power and wonder, a world that had always existed at the edges of her perception. One night, as they stood on a cliff overlooking the darkened forests, the wind tugging at their cloaks, Leora spoke softly. "I feel different here, stronger, but also afraid. What if I am not ready?" The Alpha King turned to her, the moonlight glinting off the silver embroidery of his cloak. "Fear is not weakness," he said gently. "It is proof that you are aware of the stakes. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is acting despite it. And you, Leora, have shown more courage in these days than many show in a lifetime." Their eyes met, and in that moment, the air seemed to thrum with tension. There was an unspoken understanding, a bond forming in the quiet between them. Yet Leora knew that desire, though unspoken, was dangerous. She was a noble woman of the court, and he was a king whose reputation carried both reverence and fear. Their connection, though undeniable, had to remain hidden in the shadows, delicate and forbidden. But fate, as always, did not wait for caution. The beta, ever cunning, had discovered a relic of his family's power, an artifact that could manipulate shadows and illusions. He planned to use it to humiliate Leora further, to weaken the king's claim and reclaim the thrill of dominance he so craved. He waited for the right moment, patient and silent, as shadows gathered like a storm on the horizon. It came one evening, during a rare quiet moment when Leora wandered the eastern gardens alone. The moonlight was silver on the dewy leaves, the air filled with the scent of night-blooming flowers. She felt a chill and turned, sensing something wrong. A figure emerged from the shadows, the beta's cruel smile illuminated by the faint glow of a lantern. "I wondered when you would be alone," he said, voice smooth and taunting. "You have been claimed by the king, but a pet can always be tempted back." Leora's heart raced, and instinctively, she reached for the faint magic that always lingered at her fingertips. But the beta was prepared. The relic in his hand pulsed with a dark light, distorting the air around her, making her movements sluggish, her senses confused. Panic rose in her chest. She was strong, but alone, against this dark power. She felt vulnerable, fragile. Then, as if from nowhere, the Alpha King appeared. His cloak billowed like shadowed fire, and the air around him seemed to hum with energy. "Step back," he commanded, his voice like rolling thunder. Shadows recoiled at his presence, and the beta faltered. Unease flashing in his eyes for the first time, the king moved swiftly, taking the relic from the beta and shattering it with a gesture that seemed effortless. Though Leora could feel the raw force behind it, the beta fell back, cursing under his breath, his arrogance shaken. Leora, still trembling, looked up at the Alpha King, awe and gratitude mingling with fear. "You've saved me," she whispered, barely finding her voice. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he extended his hand to her, steady and warm, a lifeline she clutched without hesitation. "You are stronger than you know," he said quietly, "and you will not face these shadows alone again." The encounter left Leora shaken, yet something deep within her stirred. She realized, for the first time, that she did not want protection out of fear alone. She wanted to stand beside him, to face the world and its dangers, to be more than the fragile noble she had once been. And in the quiet of that night, under the moon's silver gaze, she understood that her heart had begun to respond to his presence in ways she could not yet name. The beta retreated, furious and plotting, leaving whispers of his anger to trail through the corridors of the court. But the bond between Leora and the Alpha King had deepened. Their trust, fragile but undeniable, had been tested in the darkness and emerged strengthened later. As they walked through the castle's quiet halls, Leora dared a question she had not spoken aloud. "Why me?" Why claim me so publicly when others could be chosen? The Alpha King regarded her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Because you are not ordinary, he said softly. Your courage, your gift, your heart, they are rare, and I do not choose for politics alone. I choose for destiny and for the possibility that together we can face the shadows that linger over this kingdom. She looked down, her mind spinning. Destiny, power, the pull of forbidden attraction, it was overwhelming. And yet, beneath the fear, there was a thrill, a stirring hope that perhaps, just perhaps, she had found a place where she belonged. As the night deepened and the castle settled into silence, Leora felt the quiet brush of his hand against hers, not in command, but in reassurance. The simple touch carried a weight of unspoken words, trust, protection, and a connection that neither fear nor distance could sever. But even in this moment of fragile intimacy, danger lingered beyond the walls. The Beta had not forgotten, and his plots would not end so easily. Shadows moved in the corners of the court, waiting, watching. And Leora, though stronger and braver than she had known herself to be, could feel the stirrings of trials yet to come. The wind whispered through the towers, carrying the faintest hint of foreboding. And somewhere in the darkened corridors, unseen by all, the Beta plotted, his mind weaving schemes that threatened not only Leora, but the very balance of power in Eldoria. Yet, in the quiet of her chamber, Leora could not help but feel a flicker of hope. She was no longer alone, no longer fragile. With the Alpha King by her side, she felt a strength she had never known, a courage born of connection, trust, and the first tender stirrings of something deeper, something dangerous, beautiful, and undeniable. The threads of fate had tightened. Shadows and secrets awaited. But so too did courage and a bond that could defy even the darkest of schemes. And as she drifted into sleep, the memory of his steady hand, his commanding presence, and the warmth of his gaze lingered, a promise that the trials ahead would be faced together and that their story was only beginning. The castle of Eldoria had never been quieter. The corridors that usually echoed with gossip and laughter were hushed, as if the stones themselves feared the tension that had settled over the kingdom. The Beta's anger simmered like a dark fire, hidden from sight but spreading its influence in whispered warnings and veiled threats. Leora sensed it in every glance, every hushed conversation she overheard. Danger was no longer abstract, it had become real, immediate, and impossible to ignore. The Alpha King was aware of it too. He moved through the castle with the quiet precision of a predator, eyes sharp, hands steady, and a mind that calculated every risk. But he did not simply guard Leora. He sought to strengthen her, to prepare her for the trials he knew were coming. Each day, he introduced her to lessons in power, strategy, and the subtle manipulation of the supernatural energies that threaded through the kingdom. You are stronger than you believe, he told her one afternoon, standing in a chamber filled with relics and books older than the castle itself. Strength is not only about force. It is understanding, control, and courage. You have all of these, but you must trust yourself as much as you trust me. Leora nodded, determination hardening in her chest. Her earlier fears, the humiliation from the Beta, the ache of public shame, all of it had forged a new resilience. She began to feel the pulse of her own magic more clearly, sensing the threads of life and energy that bound the land and its people. Where once she had been timid, she now moved with purpose, learning to wield her gift with precision and intent. But danger is rarely patient. One evening, under the silver light of a full moon, a message arrived, carried by one of the king's spies. The Beta had gathered followers among the discontented nobles, men and women who resented the Alpha King's claim over Leora. They plotted to strike during the night, to kidnap her and use her as a pawn in a larger scheme to weaken the king's rule. The words of the message burned with malice, a promise of chaos waiting to unfold. The Alpha King did not speak immediately. He stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, eyes reflecting the moonlight. When he finally turned to Leora, his expression was unreadable. You have grown in strength, but the world is harsh. The Beta does not forgive. He will test you, and he will try to break what has been built between us. Leora's pulse quickened. She was no longer a fragile girl, But she was still learning, still untested. The thought of facing the beta again, of confronting his cruelty and schemes, sent a shiver down her spine. And yet, she did not shrink back. She had been claimed, yes, but she also claimed her own courage, her own power. That night, the castle was eerily silent. Leora wandered the eastern gardens, her senses alert, the wind carrying the scent of night-blooming flowers and the faint tang of magic. She felt a disturbance in the air, a subtle shift in the thread she had learned to sense. Then, suddenly, the shadows moved. Figures emerged, cloaked and silent, intent clear in their predatory movements. The beta had struck. Leora's heart raced, but she did not falter. Drawing on the magic she had honed, she raised her hands, summoning a faint barrier of light. The shadows recoiled, but not completely. She needed him. She needed the Alpha King. He appeared as if from the air itself, his presence radiating power. Cloaked in darkness, yet illuminated by the silver glow of his energy, he moved swiftly. A force of nature. With a gesture, the shadows around them twisted and recoiled, powerless against his strength. Leora felt a surge of awe and trust. He did not take the lead out of arrogance. He fought beside her, guiding her, protecting her, acknowledging her strength even as he shielded her from harm. When the last of the cloaked figures fell back into the darkness, the beta appeared, emerging from the shadows with fury in his eyes. "You will not keep her," he shouted, voice sharp as a blade. "She is mine to humiliate, mine to manipulate." The Alpha King's eyes darkened. "You are nothing but a shadow, Beta, and shadows fade when faced with light." Leora felt the warmth of his hand brush against hers. It was a gesture of reassurance, of unity, and it filled her with a courage she had not known she possessed. Together, they confronted the Beta, their combined power undeniable. A force that balanced strength and wisdom, fear and trust. The Beta faltered, the arrogance in his eyes giving way to uncertainty. In that moment, Leora saw not only the cruelty he had wielded, but the fear, envy, and emptiness that had driven him all along. She realized that his power came not from strength, but from exploiting others' weakness, and that he had underestimated her, as he had underestimated the Alpha King. The confrontation ended not with victory alone, but with revelation. The Beta's schemes were revealed, and his power weakened by the exposure of his fears. He retreated into the shadows, his fury unspent, but his confidence shattered. Leora and the Alpha King were left standing in the quiet of the moonlit gardens, victorious, but aware that this was only one battle in a larger war of shadows. In the aftermath, Leora felt a profound shift within herself. She had faced danger, and she had not only survived, but fought with courage and skill. Her gift, once hidden and fragile, had become a source of strength and confidence. And the Alpha King, he was no longer merely her protector. He was her partner, her equal in courage and determination. And the bond between them had deepened into something rare, something unspoken yet undeniable. That night, in the quiet of her chamber, she allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The events of the past days had been harrowing, yet transformative. The fear, the heartbreak, and the danger had forged a resilience within her, and a trust in the Alpha King that felt as natural as breathing. Yet, even in this moment of fragile peace, a shadow lingered in her mind. The Beta had retreated, but he was far from defeated. Whispers of his schemes and plots would continue to ripple through the castle, a constant reminder that the danger was not gone. Leora knew that their journey was only beginning, that the threads of destiny had tightened but not yet been fully woven. The Alpha King entered her chamber quietly, his presence a calm contrast to the storm of her thoughts. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he offered her a simple gesture, his hand, steady and warm. She took it, and the touch carried a quiet reassurance, a promise that they faced the future together. "You have done well," he said softly, "not just today, but in every choice you have made. Your courage, your strength, your heart, they are yours, and they are a force to be reckoned with. And I am proud to walk beside you, through whatever shadows await." Leora felt a tear slip down her cheek, not of sorrow, but of release. For the first time, she felt the weight of her burdens lighten, replaced by a sense of purpose and connection. She had been claimed by King, yes, but she had also claimed herself. And in that mutual recognition, something rare and beautiful took root: trust, understanding. In the first stirrings of love, outside, the castle remained silent, the night holding its breath. The wind carried whispers of the beta's retreat, and the faintest hint of danger still lingered beyond the walls. But inside, Leora and the Alpha King stood together, bound not by fear, not by circumstance, but by choice, courage, and the recognition of strength in one another. The threads of destiny had been tested and found resilient. The shadows had been confronted, though not entirely banished. And in the quiet, moonlit chamber, a bond had been forged, one that promised to face the trials ahead with courage. Trust in a shared purpose that neither fear nor malice could break. Yet, as the night deepened, the faintest tremor of unease lingered. The beta would return, and new dangers would rise. But Leora, stronger now and guided by the Alpha King's steady presence, felt a courage she had never known. Together, they would face the shadows, whatever form they took, and in doing so, transform not only their own fates, but the fate of the kingdom itself. The moonlight faded, and the first hints of dawn crept through the windows. Leora took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the Alpha King's hand in hers. She was no longer afraid. She was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that together, they were stronger than any darkness. The first rays of dawn painted Eldoria's castle in soft gold and silver. Yet a tension still lingered in the air. Whispers of the beta's schemes had not faded, they had only grown sharper, darker, like storm clouds gathering at the edges of the horizon. Leora stood at the highest tower, gazing out over the kingdom, feeling the wind tug at her cloak. She had grown stronger in the days since the Alpha King had claimed her, yet she sensed the weight of a trial yet to come. Her heart quickened as footsteps approached. The Alpha King appeared beside her, silent as the shadows he commanded, his presence a calm anchor amidst the rising storm. The beta does not give up easily, he said quietly, his gaze scanning the horizon. He will strike when he senses weakness. Tonight, he may try to test us one final time. Leora nodded, determination hardening in her chest. I am ready, she said. Whatever he brings, we face it together. The Alpha King looked at her, pride and something deeper shining in his eyes. You have grown in ways even I did not expect, he admitted. Your courage, your heart, your gift, they are extraordinary. And tonight, they will be tested as never before. As darkness fell, the castle seemed to hold its breath. The beta had gathered his remaining allies, men and women consumed by envy and ambition. And now they moved through the shadows toward the castle gates. Leora felt a tremor in the air, a faint pulse of magic, dark and restless. She stood beside the Alpha King, hands brushing his, drawing strength from the steady warmth of his presence. The beta struck swiftly, hoping to take them by surprise. Cloaked figures emerged from the forest surrounding the castle, moving silently, their intent clear. Yet the Alpha King was ready. He raised his hand, and the very air seemed to twist, bending shadows into a protective barrier round the castle. Leora felt the energy surge through her, and instinctively she joined him, weaving her own magic into the protective weave. Together, they created a force neither of them could wield alone before. The beta watched from the edge of the forest, fury and disbelief warring in his eyes. This cannot be, he hissed. She is only a girl. She cannot oppose me. Leora took a deep breath, focusing on the threads of energy around her. I'm not a girl, she said quietly, her voice carrying through the night. I am someone who has faced fear, betrayal, and cruelty, and I will not let it rule me. Not now, not ever. The words, soft yet powerful, seemed to ripple through the shadows. The beta faltered, uncertainty creeping into his arrogance. The Alpha King took the moment to move closer to Leora, his presence a shield and a challenge all at once. Together, he said, we are stronger than he ever imagined. With a coordinated surge of magic and will, Leora and the Alpha King pushed forward, their combined power illuminating the night. The beta's allies faltered, their illusions collapsing under the force of their unity. One by one, they fled into the darkness, leaving the beta alone, trembling with fury and fear. Finally, he confronted them directly, his voice rising in anger. "You will regret this. You cannot escape me." The Alpha King stepped forward, calm and unyielding. "It is not how you cannot escape," he said, his gaze locked on the beta. "It is the truth. And the truth is that you are powerless when faced with strength, courage, and unity." Leora felt a surge of confidence, her own power intertwining with his. She did not merely stand behind him, she stood beside him, her own strength shining through. "Leave this kingdom," she said firmly. "Leave now, or face the consequences of your actions." For a moment, the beta's face twisted with rage. Then, slowly, he realized that he had been defeated not by force alone, but by the courage, determination, an unbreakable bond between Leora and the Alpha King. With a final glare, he vanished into the shadows, leaving only the memory of his threats behind. The castle settled into quiet once more. Leora felt the adrenaline fade. Replaced by exhaustion and relief, she turned to the Alpha King, her heart racing not from fear, but from the closeness they shared, the unspoken acknowledgement of what they had accomplished together. He reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You have done more than survive," he said softly. "You have proven that your strength is not in the magic you wield alone, but in your heart, your courage, and the choices you make." Tears threatened to fall, not from sorrow, but from the depth of gratitude and emotion she felt. She had been claimed, yes, but she had also claimed herself. She had faced cruelty, betrayal, and fear, and she had emerged stronger, braver, and unbroken. "I could not have done it without you," she whispered. He shook his head, a faint smile touching his lips. "No, I could not have done it without you. We are stronger together." And tonight proves that more than ever. The night deepened, but the tension had eased, replaced by a quiet intimacy. They walked through the castle, hand in hand, their bond solidified by the trials they had faced. Every shadow had been confronted, every threat met, and every fear tested, and yet there remained a sense of destiny and understanding that this was not the end, but the beginning of a life intertwined, bound by courage, respect, and a growing, undeniable affection. In the grand hall, now empty and silent, the Alpha King finally spoke words that lingered in the air like a promise. "Leora," he said, his voice low, reverent. "From the moment I claimed you, I knew you were more than I could have imagined. You are not merely protected by me, you are my equal, my partner, my choice." Leora looked up, her heart swelling with a mixture of awe and longing. "And I might choose you," she said softly, the weight of her words echoing in the silent hall. He stepped closer, lifting her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss that carried respect, admiration, and a bond deeper than any words could convey. "Then it is true," he said. "We are bound not by fear, not by circumstance, but by choice, courage, and destiny. And nothing, not shadows, not betrayal, not even time, can undo it." For the first time, Leora allowed herself to truly feel the depth of her emotions. She was no longer merely a girl who had been hurt and humiliated. She was a woman who had faced darkness and emerged unbroken. And the man who stood beside her, the Alpha King, was not only her protector, but her partner, her equal, and the one who had helped her see the strength that had always been within her. Outside the castle, the first light of dawn broke over Eldoria, bathing the stone walls in gold. The beta had retreated, the shadows had been confronted, and a new chapter had begun. Leora and the Alpha King stood together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever the future held, not as master and subject, not as protector and ward, but as equals, bound by courage, trust, and a connection that destiny itself had forged. And as the wind whispered through the towers, carrying the scent of the forest and the faint hum of ancient magic, Leora felt a peace she had never known. She had been claimed, yes, but she had also claimed herself, and in doing so, found a love, a partnership, and a destiny that would shape the kingdom of Eldoria for years to come. The beta might return, the shadows might stir, and challenges would always lie ahead. But for now, in the quiet of the castle bathed in the soft light of dawn, Leora and the Alpha King stood together, unshaken, united, and unbreakable. The story of pain, betrayal, and fear had ended. The story of courage, trust, and love had begun.